So we are here today with Dr. Jane Grimwood, who is the co-director of the Genome Sequencing Center at the Hudson Alpha Institute for Biotechnology in Huntsville. And Dr. Grimwood, first of all, just let me say thank you for spending some time with us today. Thank you for allowing us to tell your story to Alabama and all the amazing things that you're doing in Huntsville.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored, honestly, to receive this, and I appreciate all your time.
Absolutely. On behalf of the whole Yellowhammer team, just congratulations on being named. And, you know, it has been really fun for us to look at your career. It has been such an exciting career in genetics and biological research. You are, of course, on the list of the most highly cited researchers in the world. So tell us, what has been the most rewarding part of the work that you do?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think the most rewarding part is that everything we do is pretty much in the public domain. So I spend my life generating DNA sequence, and for those who don't appreciate that, so every living organism is made up of DNA, so 4 different bases. The order of those bases is what's important for that organism. So what we do and what the very talented group in my lab does is to generate this DNA sequence. As I said, most of this is in the public domain, so we generate this sequence, put it out there, and make it available for other researchers to find the great stories, find the great breakthroughs that are going to make a difference in the world. And I think that's really what gets me out of bed every day.
I can imagine, and some of those things must be incredibly exciting. Are there any commonly held misconceptions about your field in particular, or the specific work that you all do?
Probably, and honestly, up to recently, it hasn't been realistic to change this, is that you generate one sequence and that is what the sequence of the genome is. So I worked on the Human Genome Project. That's sort of where I started out in genomics. Honestly, before that, I was working in cell biology, so I made a switch to genomics. So the Human Genome Project was a huge undertaking to sequence the genome of the human genome. It ran for 13, 14 years. It cost billions and billions of dollars, and it was a huge collaboration between many, many, many countries, many, many, many people all working for the same goal. At that time, technology was such that was, I mean, it was sort of described as, you know, walking on the moon. It was such a giant question that was asked, and you know that huge technology advances were made during that time, and we completed that in 2004. And since then, the field has changed so much. We can now pretty much do that human genome that took 13 years within the space of 1 day, 2 days. Literally hundreds of thousands times cheaper. So now we have so back to your question of being, you know, a genome is the genome of that species. That's not actually the case. The genome is the genome of one person, and every person is different. Every plant is different. So now we have the opportunity, especially, and this is really only in the last few years, to sequence multiple people, sequence hundreds of thousands of people, sequence whole collections of plants to really find what those differences are, to mine that information, to use it either in public health or in crop plant development or whatever your field is.
You know, you mentioned that there has been just these remarkable changes in the field. Have there been any changes in the participation of females specifically? What was your experience in the beginning of your career, and how have you seen that evolve?
Females are still in the minority. It's getting better. I think it is different now, and you know, we're making a lot of effort to change that. There's challenges with being a woman in science. I mean, the challenges of being a woman in any kind of industry. If you want to bring up your family, science is a little different in that I think one of the main reasons that it changes so fast. You can't, in my field, what we use to sequence DNA, the instruments, they change every 2 years pretty much. So you don't really have the opportunity to go out for 5 years and then come back and expect to be able to pick it up, because it's just totally different. The funding is also can be difficult. Most scientific academic institutions, you have to bring in your own funding to support your lab. So to do that, when you're raising a family is difficult. But some of the challenges are just like other challenges, and I think that's why a lot of women drop out of science, because it becomes too challenging. So we really need to make an effort to bring more females into science and to keep them there.
So in that, is there a certain level of mentorship that you find yourself doing or receiving that has kind of helped you either become successful or help others come along so that they could be successful as well?
Yeah, I mean, mentorship is huge. Hudson has a great educational research department. And one of the main focuses is to mentor female students to not only keep them in science, but also to get kids in school to appreciate that this is a great field to be in. That girls can do as good as boys can, of course, which, is always the question. I've always had male mentors. I would love to think that I'm a mentor at this point to people who are coming behind me and will stay in this field. This field is going to be exploding, in the next 10 years. And there's a lot of opportunity for everybody to take a part.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting. You spent a big part of your life in the UK. So are there any ways that Alabama is similar to England in a way that we might not expect?
Wow, that's a tough question. I just done my first postdoc in England. I got on a plane with a suitcase and on my own and flew to Boston, where I did my first postdoc. So I did a postdoc in Dartmouth College. I then flew across country to California. I did a postdoc at University of California, San Francisco, which is then when I got the job in Stanford, which is my current job. And I was there for, I guess, 8 years. And then we packed up the whole Genome Center and brought it back to Huntsville in Alabama when Hudson Alpha started. It was a huge culture shock when I left England to move to the Boston area. Similarities, it's hard. Science is the same. I mean, you can do science in Alabama and science in England, and you could be in a lab and you wouldn't know. In terms of everything else is different, honestly. There's very few similarities. England is small. America is fast. Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm not sure I have a good answer to that.
No, it is. It is a tough question. Are there anything that has surprised you about Alabama that you hadn't considered before you lived here?
Everybody in Alabama is so friendly. I think that's not, British have this sort of perception of being stiff upper lip. I mean, I guess, and honestly, it's true. People are much more friendly in Alabama. Huntsville itself has changed a huge amount since I got here. We arrived in 2000, and it's a different city to what it was when we arrived. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the biggest. Plus, as I say, the size of everything. Mm-hmm. In England, everything is so very small, but here everything is so very large.
Absolutely. There's so much of your work that must involve making progress and, really just understanding the tiniest building blocks of just what makes up life, right? So in your opinion, what impediments might there be to scientific progress in the world today, either maybe as it relates specifically to your work or just the understanding generally?
I mean, funding is also always an issue. The US has probably the largest amount of scientific funding in the world, but it's still an issue. Competition, although good in some ways, is an impediment in others. I mean, all the reason why I've been successful is that I've always been, well, not always, but recently been part of large collaborations, collaborations across different institutions, different countries, all working to the same goal. And that was really started with the Human Genome Project, but has increased in future years. So I think the way to move forward is with these large projects where there's no redundancy and everybody has the same purpose and the goal. Also, public acceptance of genomics is continues to be an issue, which I think is hindering in some respects. The way to move forward. I mean, we've made such vast changes, and I think we need to spend more time educating about what that means to understand your genome in terms of your disease risk, for example, what that means to have a GMO, genetically modified crop. There's a lot of all those things in my mind are great advances, but I think it's going to take some time to get people to accept and appreciate what power that can give them.
Mm-hmm. And just to create that general awareness of why it's important to understand.
Mm-hmm. And what it can do for them. I mean, genomics is very, very powerful if you use it in the right context.
Mm. You mentioned these large scale collaborations and groups. How important is diversity among those groups?
Absolutely. Very, very, very important. And it's something we are working on still to achieve appropriate diversity. And I think that's still a work in progress, but I think, the time is right now to make those changes and to make sure that every scientific project has the appropriate diversity, and people are given that opportunity to take part.
Absolutely. What are some examples of something that's just really exciting that's happening in your field that you feel like people should pay more attention to?
I think that probably goes back to what we can do now with genomics. 2 years ago, I wasn't even having the conversations that I'm having today with groups as to what we can do. There's now projects out there to sequence 100,000 people. England has a 100,000 genome project to sequence the genomes of 100,000 people to see what's out there. England has the Tree of Life project, which is sequencing all 60,000 genomes in the United Kingdom. Alabama has the AGHI, which is the Alabama Genomics Health Initiative, which is to sequence people in Alabama to give them the understanding of their genomic risk and genomic issues. So those type of studies are going to become standard. Gone is the day where we have the one genome. I work a lot with sequencing plants. We are trying to, one of our main things right now is we are starting down the road of improving Alabama agriculture to try and use genomics to find plants that do better in Alabama, that can survive the heat, can survive the pest pressure, which is obviously significant in the South. Plants that can give a farmer a good yield so that they can get a good turnout around on their crop. And that really only is possible now, and where we can sequence there's large collections of, take one example, soybean, for example. You can sequence now the whole of these collections. You can look inside all these genomes and find traits that you can link to, the genetic trait that you can link to a plant that's taller, for example, a plant that puts its leaves out to the sun more than others, a plant that can survive a pest when other plants can. And you can mine that information and breed it back into the crops which will do better in the South and in Alabama. So those kind of things are really only possible in the last, I would say, 2 years. So it's a really exciting time to be in genomics, just to see where this is going to lead us.
And I can imagine that from the research, the information that's produced by this research, that the yields are just, they have to be extraordinary for, you know, clearly the agricultural industry, but surely they're exponentially exciting to other scientists, and they must have applications just far beyond, you know, content. That's just such an exciting thing to see, the exponential aspect of how that research can continue to affect things over and over again.
Sure, and we work very hard to make sure that this data is public, so it is available to everyone, so we can get the information that we need from it, but also it's available for other people who have different questions that they're asking.
Well, one more question. So is there any advice that you would offer to maybe a young woman specifically who was interested in genomics now at such an exciting time in the field?
Yeah, I think, you know, I get this question a lot, and I think it's really important for people to find something that they're passionate about, something that, you know, is going to be their career that they want to do every day. And I think now, I really didn't have this when I was at school, but you have the opportunity to intern various places. Take your time to find something that really suits you. Also, I think there's a perception of scientists sitting at the lab bench with a lab coat on, measuring, you know, liquids. And that still happens, but that can't happen, I don't think, in isolation anymore. You have to be able to program computers. You have to be able to work with large data sets. You have to be able to have at least a basic understanding of statistics, because science is just, at least in genomics, it's just not the same as it was. And you really need to be able to take all the information you can get from being in the lab and use that in ways that you didn't need to do before. So computers, that's what I always say. Make sure that you're comfortable not only with science, but also with programming. And I never had that. You know, that wasn't available when I remember when I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, I took my computer carried it on the airplane. I mean, it was such a small thing. And that's all, you know, that's all that there was at that time. But things are just so different now that, so that's what I say. Find something that you love. Take your time to find that, and then make sure that you have all the experience you need to be able to fulfill that field that you choose.
That's great advice. And just the well-rounded aspect of things is, you know, there's so much more availability now to learn at any opportunity and kind of create that well-roundedness early in your career, more so now.
And genomics is a great field to choose, whether that's genomics in the lab, whether that's genetic counseling. There's going to be a lot of questions that are going to need to be answered. So I give a plug for genomics.
Well, Dr. Grimwood, this has been such a pleasure for us. And again, thank you for taking some time to help us understand a little bit more about the field. And just again, thank you for all the amazing things you're doing in Alabama. We just are so glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate this award very much.